Hi everyone, and welcome to the second lecture on APA formatting. This one will be focusing on in-text citations and references. Just some notes before we begin. We need to always be citing when we are using other people's ideas and work. This is to avoid plagiarism and give credit where credit is due. You do not have to cite common knowledge, so stating that people tend to have two arms is well known and does not need a citation from, say, a medical institution. And make sure your sources are credible and peer-reviewed whenever possible. So for in-text citations, there are two ways to go about this. First is parenthetical, where the source information is presented in parentheses. A statement is made and it ends with Smith 2023. The second is using a narrative structure, where the source information is included within the sentence. You could say Smith 2023 stated that, or in 2023, Smith stated that, and so on. If you are going to directly quote something word for word from an author, which I do not recommend you do in this class, I would prefer that you paraphrase, there are a few ways to do this in APA. First, it depends on how long the quotation is. If it's under 40 words, you place this text within quotations before and after with the full citation. So this includes author, the 4-digit year, and page number within that sentence. For a block quotation, which uses more than 40 words, you don't keep this in line with the paragraph, you move it down to a new line, and it's indented a ½ inch. This should be double-spaced, and you do not use quotation marks. You still include the same full citation with the author, year, and page number. Here are examples of short and long quotations. At the top is the short quote in line with the text between quotation marks with the citation at the ends. On the bottom, there is the block quotation where the longer quote is shifted onto its own line, indented without quotations, and the citation is provided. Paraphrasing is restating an idea but using your own words and is preferred in research communication. This method helps summarize ideas from multiple authors or condense a lengthy text. The example on the slide states that there is an increase in recovery of motor functions if spinal cord injury occurs during early development compared to if it occurred during adulthood with the parenthetical Brumley 2015 citation. As you can imagine, this full paper talks about this in depth and across multiple situations, but this summarizes a longer paper into a single sentence. And even though it is your own words, it's not your own idea, so there does need to be a citation. The citation is included within the text, and the page number is optional, but less common with a paraphrasing citation. When you cite one or two authors, use their names. This could be parenthetical, so Smith and Mark 2023, or narrative with according to Smith and Mark with 2023 in parentheses. However, note that when it is parenthetical, you don't write out the word and, but use the ampersand or and symbol. With narrative formats, you write out the word and. If you have more than two authors, you use the first author's name and then add et al. At the ends. And note that there is a period after the al because et al. Is shortened from the Latin phrase et alia, which stands for and others. When you are using parenthetical citations, you would, for example, say John et al., period, comma, 2019. Or using the narrative format, you would say John et al., period, 2019 in parentheses. When you are citing multiple papers for a single sentence, you put a semicolon between them. However, the question becomes, what if the authors have the same name? If two different authors have the same name, then you capitalize the first initial of their name, then provide their last name and the date. So if both authors are Smith, you would say J. Smith, year, semicolon, L. Smith, year. If you are using the same author for a sentence, maybe they published 2 studies in the same year, you would label them as A, B, C, and so on. So this might look like Smith 2005A, 2005B. The following examples show citations for 1, 2, and 3+ authors in both parenthetical and narrative styles. Pause to take a closer look. You should always be citing primary sources whenever possible. If you read a paper and they cite another paper that seems important, you should go out and find and read that original paper. However, sometimes that original paper is not always accessible. In the example here, there was a paper written in 2020 that cites work from 1945 which can no longer be accessed. In this case, you would talk about both the paper in which this was found and the original paper. This first example shows this in a narrative format and says, an article written by Adams 2020 cited a source written by Jones 1945, which is not accessible, shows that past research has, and then goes on from there. You could also use this in a parenthetical format and state Jones 1945 as cited by Adams 2020. However, it is important to note that in the reference list, only the Adams 2020 paper is cited. Citing page numbers. If you need to cite multiple pages, you use PP and the page range. If you are only citing a single page, you use a single P with the page number. A period always comes after the letter P, and there is not a space between the letter and the number. For example, you might say Smith, 2020, PP, period, 5 through 7. Sometimes sources have missing information. If you need to cite a page number but one isn't available, include the paragraph number, which is abbreviated as para with a period after it. In parenthetical style, this would look like Douglas, 1998, para 4. In narrative style, this would look like Douglas and then in parentheses, 1998, para 4. If you do not have a publication year, use the abbreviation N.D. which stands for no date. Treat this as if it were a date, whether it be in parenthetical or narrative style. If you have an unknown author, use the title of the document. If the title is long, you can shorten it for just the in-text citation and add quotations to it. If you have an anonymous author, treat anonymous as their name. You would cite this as, say, Anonymous 2018. For your reference page, references, which is capitalized, is centered on the top of a new page. It is not attached to the last page you were writing on. Your reference section should be double-spaced along with the rest of your paper. The references should be in alphabetical order according to the first author, and they need to be hanging indents, which means the first line of each reference is flush to the left and the subsequent lines are indented 1/2 inch. I have posted a how-to document on hanging indents to the course page. There is a specific order of information for references at the end of your paper. First, you would put the author's last name with a comma followed by the first initial. So I would be Baca-Zeff, S, period. Sometimes authors also include a middle initial. If this is the case, include that after the first initial with a period between the letters. So this would become Baca-Zeff, S, period, D, period. I'll show you a full example at the end, but you would then provide the year of publication followed by a period, the title of the publication, regardless of if it's a journal, a book, or what have you. If it is a journal, next you would add the name of the journal in italics. Sometimes students cite the website or a database the article comes from, but that is not correct. You wouldn't say PsycInfo, you would look at the paper itself and see that it was published in the Journal of Psychology. And the journal this comes from is italicized. You will see that articles have different volume numbers. Provide that volume number after the journal name with a comma. The volume number is italicized, but the comma is not. Next, if the journal article has an issue number, place the number in parentheses directly after the volume number. The issue number should not be italicized. For example, you can see we have the Journal of Psychology, 42 in parentheses 2, and again, the comma and issue number are not italicized. After that, provide the page numbers of the article separated by a dash and followed by a period. In the most recent APA guide, you must include the Digital Object Identifier, or DOI code. This is a series of numbers attached to a journal article. It needs to be hyperlinked using the URL format, as you can see here. Previous editions used just DOI and the number, but that is no longer used. Again, note that this needs to be the DOI and not the website the article was pulled from. As a reminder, references go in alphabetical order. If you are referencing the same author multiple times, then you move on to the second author's name in the list. However, if you only have the same single author or set of authors in the same order, list them in chronological order. This shows you the order of information we talked about for journal articles. See that there is author, year, title, name, volume, issue, page number, and DOI. Note the ampersand symbol, what information is in parentheses, and what information is italicized. Books and chapters in a book are a little different in that you need to put the copyright year. The title of the book is capitalized, but is followed by the edition number in parentheses and the publisher. We are focusing less on books since you need to be citing journal articles for this class, but it is still helpful in case you want to cite the textbook or take additional upper division psych courses. This is an example taken from the APA manual of what a reference section looks like. Pause to read. Purdue OWL is a great resource for APA citations. It provides plenty of examples and you can see how to cite different materials. There are APA generators out there, but a lot of them are incorrect. If you use them, you do need to check the formatting for each one. And this is all I have for you. I'll see you in the next APA lecture.